Hello. And um, so, just a couple things before we get started. Um, this is being recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic situation, also known as coronavirus. And so, a few questions and answers are going to be slightly different than the average would, just because of that. Um, to a large extent, many schools are going to electronic learning, and the next year that is coming up is very uncertain for everyone involved. So it's going to be um, slightly different than the average, but still productive, I believe. So, um, for those who don't know, this is my mom, Ann Goble, and I just wanted to talk about uh, your experience in the education system since you have been a teacher for 3 years. Okay. And so just gonna go into that a little bit. Uh, Possibly go into some things about the broader education system, uh, just off of her experience. So the very beginning of things started in the college experience for you, and learning from other teachers. Uh, what would you say was most valuable from your Ivy Tech experience?
Um, the thing that stays in the forefront of my mind from Ivy Tech is, for one, I have to cite, being a teacher, cite my source here. Tammy Conwell was a fantastic teacher. She's retired now, but she taught in Muncie, um, the Ivy Tech campus downtown. And she was very helpful with the special ed side of things. I would not know what I do about it if it hadn't been for her. She explained from how the entire modern special ed process got started to very specifically what IEPs are, how they're used, how they are formed. Um, I was not aware of how active parents were in getting the modern special education process formed. It was really parents rising up and saying our students deserve just as much an education as every other student. And the days of, the special ed room being at the end of the farthest hallway, one classroom with washers and dryers and dishes and dish racks, life skills being taught is over. And I can't say that life skills are not taught, but that being the focus or the only focus of the special ed curriculum, and very much rightly so.
And how does that affect your job now?
Well, the largest effect is I have many students in my classroom with an IEP, with special needs. And so they need different delivery, they need different assessments. Sometimes they need different tools. So, yes, it complicates the life of a teacher.
Hmm.
But if it's the right thing for students, which it is, then that's what teachers need to do.
Right.
So I have just in 3 years have several personal stories and students that it's just glaring. When I was in elementary school, the student would have been in that room at the end of the farthest hallway, um, learning how to fold laundry, when in fact he or she was a very gifted math student, struggled with social skills, interpersonal skills, um, relating to reading, but many other things off the charts and need to be honed. Those skills need to be captured, and we need to help those students find ways to be very successful in society, which they can be.
Does that mostly apply to children with autistic tendencies?
Well, the particular student I was just talking about was autistic, but it applies to every special need. Speech students, students with articulation, with incoming and outgoing speech problems. It runs the gamut. SLD, specific learning disorder. There are students that just have those specific needs with specific skills. Um, it could apply to any special need.
And so you believe that every person in those rooms have something to offer society?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There are still severe and profound classrooms. However, they are not only focused on life skills. They're not only, daycare basically for families. I've seen nonverbal students in wheelchairs that uh, uh, those children have something to offer to this world. They're here for a reason. And many, many times are inspiring, very, very inspiring to people. And luckily, we have some really awesome teachers that work with them and find ways to communicate with them. They may not be verbal, but they communicate in other ways. Music reaches them. Sometimes they create music. They may be artistic. There are many ways that they can communicate.
So then, was there a specific experience from Ivy Tech that formulated anything as to how you teach or anything like that?
Yeah, we had to develop what they call an Efolio before we graduated from Ivy Tech. And one, it taught me how to create a website. It taught me how to take the highlighted standards that I was focusing on and expound on them and expand on them. So, just writing in a more professional way, speaking in a more professional way, giving that presentation to a group of teachers, peers, and future alumni and people of my choosing from the community that I intended to teach in. So it just brought a lot of people together to give me a lot of feedback and helped me to present myself and my education and my understandings in a very professional way. And that's carried over with me.
And so that electronic portfolio, that just from what I've seen, that's a large part of what teaching is now, and how organization goes into everything like that. Could you give teachers now or teachers in the future tips to organization?
Um, to me, it feels like a lot of obvious things. I mean, be a good recorder of things, be proactive in your planning. I've seen teachers that I think do a much better job than I do, and then others that I think are still in the writing in a plan book and grade book mode, just because that's how they've always done it. Um, and if that works for them, it works. I would say become very comfortable with spreadsheets, the Google suite in general. Don't be afraid to create your own items that you need. I mean, I've created sheets and tables and documents. In most jobs, teaching is so unique in this way because in most jobs, you walk in and they say, here are the forms that you're going to use, and you need to fill these out and keep track of them. And this is why you use them, this is how you use them, when you use them. Teaching is completely unique in that way. The school gives you very little in most cases. Um, they may give you a lunch count sheet, but they don't hand you a form to fill out to keep track of information you need for IEPs, to document that you're fulfilling the needs of IEPs, or um, just a record of behavioral issues. No one gives you that. So you create that on your own and then present it when it's asked for.
Right.
And that can be at IEP meetings, staff meetings, evaluations. Superintendents can ask for that type of information. The police can ask for that type of information. In some situations, DCS. So you need it. It's dependent on the children's best interest that you are organized, and you do that in the way that works best for you. And you need to be versed enough. And in the digital world today, I mean, today, my principal asked me for information for a specific student. We're talking about retentions at this time of year. Um, and it was as easy as I copied a row of a table I had created and pasted it into an email, and it was everything she needed, just like that.
Okay. So then moving on from Ivy Tech
Mm-hmm.
to IU East. And how was that jump for you going from the community college to a public college?
Um, so, for one, I'll say it was from what I heard from students who had been at IUE since their freshman year, I had a huge advantage. For instance, what I said about special ed before is a gigantic example because they didn't get that there.
Hmm.
They did not get the level of education instruction that I did because they didn't have Tammy, because they didn't have those early education courses that were already focusing in on my major. They were doing prereqs, prereqs, prereqs. I was doing prereqs too, but it was also right away stepping into the education field. So I had a big advantage there. I knew more than they did about those types of things. So it was a good jump for me. I was really glad I had gone to Ivy Tech when I thought I was just getting that out of the way there, and then it ended up being a big advantage. Um, it's just bigger, not necessarily bigger classes because it was IU East,
Right.
but it's just expanding into more resources and just a broader scale of thinking.
Hmm.
And my first year at IU East was finishing up everything before my methods classes, basically. And then methods classes that senior year were just what methods classes are. It's how to. So this is a class specifically about how to teach social studies in the modern classroom to be most effective. And then the same with science, the same with reading, language arts. Um, so really good experiences though. And um, my elementary school it's just been announced that we got our STEM certification that we've been working for a couple of years on really, really steadily. And so that process is complete. We have STEM certification for 5 years. And I was on that committee to get that going. I had a special interest in it just because of how much I love interdisciplinary teaching, and I believe in it so much. There's simply not enough time in an educational day, in a school day, to teach everything in isolation. There's just simply not enough time. And I know from my years in elementary school and watching my kids go through, the depth is not there that should be there. But if you're crossing over a reading passage and a social studies topic and folding in a science topic, you can do a lot more. You can go to a lot more depth. Yes, you're going to learn about the nouns in this passage, but you're also going to learn about the technology that's being discussed. And this is how it was done 100 years ago, and this is how it's advanced, and that's how that part fits into US history. And it just you can fold it all in, get their hands on some things, and it's a much better outcome and higher interest levels at the same time. Because instead of, okay, we're reading a passage about Johnny and Susie, now we're talking about nouns. Now let's talk about this war in US history. And now let's talk about simple machines. And nothing goes together. But when you integrate things, it makes a lot more sense.
Could you give any criticism to that style of teaching? Like maybe it dilutes some learning that may happen, or that it doesn't give enough focus onto what needs to be done. Like if you're talking about simple machines, and then you start integrating, the Revolutionary War, and then you talk about the story that's applied to it, it it all gets kind of muddied.
I entirely disagree.
Okay.
I don't think it muddies it at all. I think it laser focuses it.
Hmm.
I've seen the connections being made. I've seen kids go, oh, we don't have nearly the instance of, why are we learning this in math? We're never going to use
Okay.
this. When they see, okay, ratios, the British versus the colonials,
Hmm.
the colonists, talking about ratios, this many versus this many. What does that mean for them? If they've got almost twice as many, suddenly ratios have meaning
Hmm.
instead of just two numbers with a colon in the middle. And you need to memorize this. This is what a ratio is.
Right.
So I have not seen any type of diluting anything. It focuses it, and there are challenges with STEM learning. Absolutely, um, you have to have a lot of resources. You have to have things on hand. If you're going to let students lead their education more, and they say, well, we could build a whatever, to figure out how to do this, you're going to need some stuff. And luckily, we've got a STEM room set up. We have an entire room stocked with just about anything you can think of as far as odds and ends to go and explore. So, but I feel like a little off track because you were asking about IU East. But
Yeah.
my point was every class in my methods courses taught integration of concepts and subjects and topics, and that was a big strength for me. And so it was a very natural thing for me to help with our STEM certification.
So, okay. So with IU East, or just the college experience in general, um, would there be any criticisms or anything that you felt that you got that got left out, or anything like that?
I think every teacher, certainly all of the newer teachers that I've talked to, and I think teachers in general feel like once they've student taught and they've got a feel for what the classroom's really like, then they get into their own classroom. And I think every teacher feels like they didn't teach me classroom management. They didn't teach me how do I get these kids quiet?
Right.
How do I get them, they teach us we need to engage them. We need to, draw them in, but how?
Right.
In one isolated lesson that you're teaching during student teaching, sure, you can do that
Right.
once a day, but we're talking about
An 8-hour period.
several subjects a day. We're talking about having classrooms with students, 5 students with IEPs, 9 students with IEPs. So these, some of them have such strong attention problems to begin with. And then you're asking them, give me your attention here. Give me your attention here. Okay, now work on your own.
Right.
And it is a complex situation.
Mm.
And I think that's what every newer teacher feels like. They didn't teach me this. But that's the problem. They can't teach you this.
Mm.
They can tell you about it. They can give you a taste, but that's something you only learn by doing it.
Yeah. I think it was a TED Talk that I was listening to. I don't remember who it was, but he said the children in classrooms are not really uh, they're not really suffering from any kind of mental illness or anything like that. They're suffering from being children, and so expecting them to pay attention 4 hours upon hours every
Oh,
day is not viable.
it's not realistic.
Hmm.
I mean, um, and that's something that they taught us at IU East. One of my instructors was very, very good about explaining that. She said back when she started teaching, so we're talking 20 plus years ago, you could expect students to have a fifth grade students to have a solid 20, maybe 25-minute attention span.
Hmm.
Students' attention spans overall, nationwide, have decreased to the level that they are teaching us now. 15 minutes is approachable to most fifth graders. They told us to have a very quick attention grabber, something to pull them in, let them know what you're going to teach them, and then expect to hold their attention for 15 minutes. And then they need some release time. They need
Hmm.
some independent work time, some station work time, something else. Get up and move. Um, it's just gotten smaller, and for obvious reasons. The most obvious reasons they cite are television, video games, every screen. Basically, most of my students have cell phones, so their attention spans are just and they expect immediate gratification.
Hmm.
They're not good at delaying gratification.
Right.
And that's a challenge with STEM teaching because that doesn't happen in a day. Those things spread out over time. And that's hard for them because they expect lesson, worksheet, and then maybe a quiz or something over it. They want it over.
Mm.
So that's tough, but they see, they're more interested because there's some meat to it and there's some meaning to it. So they tend to, like it and gravitate toward it, even though it's a little foreign.
Mm. Do you think those 15 minutes, do you think those are the uh, shorter attention span children, or is that average?
Average,
Really?
yes.
Hmm.
For a 10, 11-year-old.
What would lower be?
Oh, less.
How
I,
much?
kindergarten, kindergarten, first grade, they're looking at 5 to 10 minutes
Of instruction?
of, yes, expecting them to sit and focus. And yes, they try to do it in 5 to 10 minute bursts
Okay.
throughout the day. And then, you start getting into second and third grade, a little more,
Hmm.
maybe 12, 14 minutes. They're moving up.
And then fifth grade is probably 15, 20.
15, 20 maybe.
Okay. And, okay. All right. And, okay. So then you student taught for a while, correct?
A semester.
Yep. And so how does student teaching then translate into actual teaching? Meaning, how, what was that transition like, and what did you gain from that jump?
Okay. Well, my personal experience is all I can really speak to.
Mm,
I'll say the intention of student teaching is to take these students who have been sitting in a classroom learning from instructors and turn them into teachers.
right.
Turn the tables and now take what you've learned and go do it. We've
Mm,
been teaching you how to do it. Now you're actually going to go do it. That's one um, thing that is achieved, that, one purpose. Another is to hook prospective teachers up with schools.
mm,
I could not believe how many of my classmates were hired by the school they student taught in. I didn't see that coming. I didn't know how often that happened.
you were.
I was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I student taught in fourth grade at the school that I'm in. But it's a fantastic opportunity for both administrator and prospective teacher because you get a feel for the school. You get an idea, would I like to work here? The administrator, principal, gets a feel for you. Is this someone I want working for me?
Mm,
Is this someone who fits here? Because definitely every school has its own culture, has its own feel, um, has its own clientele. Students are vastly different at different schools. And every community is different. Some communities have one elementary school, so their culture is all the same.
mm,
Some have private and public and parochial, so the cultures are very, very different at each school. But I found within our town, small, fairly mid-sized small town,
20,000 people.
we have some very different cultures at our elementary schools. So anyway, so student teaching serves several purposes, but my experience, I was put with an experienced teacher. She's somewhere in the neighborhood of, I'd say, 25 years at the time teaching experience, mostly in the grade she was in. So fourth grade. I love Indiana history. So that was very attractive to me. I got to teach reading, math, and social studies in our classroom. Not every day, the entire time. They ease you in. So the first week you mostly observe, and then you teach a lesson. And then the next week you teach 3 lessons maybe, and it increases until the last weeks
It's the period distribution.
you are entirely teaching the class, and the classroom teacher leaves
Okay.
for a decent part of the day and, spends time planning, doing whatever, end of the semester things that she needs to do. So, one of the most difficult things for me in student teaching was having to videotape myself. I've gotten better at this.
Yeah.
At the beginning of, at Ivy Tech, I struggled with it a lot. I couldn't stand it.
What do you think that is?
In general, people don't like to hear themselves or see themselves on video, typically. Most people are that way. It just, everyone's got some self-conscious stuff anyway, and that just hikes it up to a completely different level.
Mm.
And you know, and I'm a kid of the 80s, so I didn't grow up with a cell phone making TikToks. I was in my backyard.
Yeah, and you also had the parents that you did.
Yeah. Although they did let me watch MTV and,
Right. But
yeah.
yeah. The the whole concept of stage fright to me is kind of foreign. Just because
Right.
I guess I grew up in theaters and stuff like that.
Well, you started reading at church when you were about 8 years old.
Right.
And then when you joined choir, it was,
Off to the races.
yeah, pretty much.
um, yeah. So let's see.
So, student teaching, I mean, that was my experience. And at the end of my student teaching, which, college semesters end before elementary semesters end. So, there were, I think, 4 weeks of school left when I was done student teaching.
Okay.
And my principal, my
No boss.
student teaching principal at the time, yes, asked if I would like to stay on as an aide for the rest of the school year. And I did that in the grade level, in the fourth grade level that I had been in.
Does that also usually happen?
Not always, but sometimes.
Okay.
So she, I think, was trying to retain me there. She liked the idea of me working there, so she asked me to stay on as an aide. And then they had a very senior teacher retire in 5th grade, and his room was vacant, and I put in for that position, and she called me in. So
Nice. So backpedaling slightly, um, you had, let's see, how long was that? Maybe 13 years at a at-home daycare.
11.
11. Okay. And that obviously got, your toes wet a little bit dealing with kids all the time. Um, for one, what was the general age range uh,
The daycare?
for the daycare?
Oh,
And how how did that make you decide where you wanted to go in elementary teaching?
yeah. It definitely played a part. So age range, I watched kids as young as 8 weeks old and up to 4th grade, in the summer. Um, that's the age range. Mostly, the younger kids. I'll never forget when I first started out, you were 9 months old, and I had 4 baby carriers lined up in the living room every day. So 4 infants that still fit in their baby carriers. And, it was feed, 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 change, 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 nap, 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 nap. That's what I did. And also, along with, the 4 infants, 2 toddlers running around too. So it was a challenge, but I wanted to stay home. And so that's what I did. And not everyone who watches this might know, but I went to IU Bloomington right out of high school. And I completed a semester and a half-ish there. Mostly money concerns are what led me to stop school at that point and go back home and work. I was just on complete loans and worried about the debt. And then I met my now husband, and that pretty much sealed the deal. And I was done with school and wanted to get married. So, anyway, I had about 18 credit hours, and I knew this entire time, after getting married, having my children, the whole daycare situation, the entire time I knew I wanted to go back to school. It was just a matter of when was the right time for my family. And once Isaac got to be 7 and more independent, as far as, his care and things like that, and Sam was 11, definitely independent, um, I felt like it was time that I could start doing some things online. So that's when I went back. And my initial thought when I started looking at classes was nursing. And I think most of that, the appeal was income, thinking that that's something that I could, make a decent amount of money at. Um, the schedule was the big concern because nurses have to work a lot of odd hours sometimes, long hours. So, I started looking at what it took, what classes, what kind of, end of schooling, what would be involved, like the methods classes, basically for nursing. And I just thought, I've started my own little preschool here in my house, which is what I was doing at the time, lining up the 3 and 4 and 5 year olds at the dining room table and teaching them. And it's what I wanted to do when I was 10 years old. When I was 10 years old, I was playing school in my walk-in closet with my dolls and bears and my little chalkboard my mom gave me. So it's really what I always wanted to do. I just, was thinking more on the income side for a while, but once I started at Ivy Tech, it changed very quickly. And I said, nope, that's really not what I want to do. And luckily I was early enough, it didn't have an impact on classes I had taken. So that's how that happened.
And then you said the oldest that you babysat for was 4th grade?
In that neighborhood, I mean,
Okay.
I may have still had a 5th grader come, for a summer, but it was right in that neighborhood.
Yeah. So, do you think that that affected your decision at all as to what grade that you tried to go for?
No, I think the thing that affected the grade level I was thinking of more than anything, well, I think 2 things. One, I had worked with small children for so long. I had been working with infants, toddlers, preschoolers for the most part for 11 years.
Hmm.
and the idea of having kids that I could carry on a little bit more, deeper conversation with was appealing. Being able to go to depth with subjects. So my initial thinking going into elementary ed was third, fourth, fifth, because I feel like the foundation is laid, in K1, 2, and then third, fourth, fifth, you can get more, in depth with things. And to me, sixth graders are middle schoolers
Mm.
because that when I was in sixth grade, I was in middle school.
Newcastle's weird.
And Newcastle's weird, but we're changing. And by maybe not this next school year, but the one after that, they'll be in the middle school here too. So, and I don't think I'd ever be interested in teaching middle school. I wouldn't rule it out, but I like elementary.
Mm. And that's part one for this segment, and we'll be back for part two.